Okay, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Sarah from Nyeri County Referral Hospital, and I'm going to share with you the outcomes of pre-authorization of selected and restricted antimicrobials at the Nyeri County Referral Hospital. Next slide, please. So part of the antimicrobial stewardship activities in controlling irrational use of antimicrobials is to actually restrict the prescription of this, or rather the prescribing of these antibiotics, and mostly those in the watch and reserve category. So at the facility, we have a way of limiting these antimicrobials through a defined approval process. And this is a process that is actually guided by the WHO classification of antimicrobials. They're in 3 categories: access, watch, and reserve, and also the KML and the hospital formulary. So as a result, you actually observe a reduction in irrational use of these antimicrobials. And also, as a result, you slow down the emergence of resistance because you protect the effectiveness of available or existing antimicrobials. Next, please. So the objective, especially for this abstract, was to assess the outcomes of pre-authorization of antibiotics in the watch and reserve categories. Please note that this is work that is ongoing. It's not that like a study per se, but we just picked data for a given or defined period of time. Next. So some of the key interventions that we actually carried out. One was to classify the antimicrobial medicines based on the WHO aware classification. We then developed an antibiotic pre-authorization form, request form. We sensitize prescribers at the facility and also at the administration level so that we can get that support and bring everyone on board. We also did a pilot in one of the medical wards for 1 month and later rolled out this form for use in the hospital. And so, as I said, data collection has been continuous, and we've done analysis, given feedback to prescribers. Next, please. And the study variables here, one, patient details. This one we collected data on their age, ward, their weight and height, prescription details. So here we looked at antimicrobials prescribed, their dosages, route and frequency of administration, duration of treatment and clinical indications. Then diagnostic details, we looked at antibiotic sensitivity tests carried out before request, and the pathogens identified. Other parameters included the cost of therapy and whether there were any prescribing errors. So what we found out is the results are based on the 484 forms that were filled from November 2019 to December 2022. And these forms were filled from 9 inpatient departments. So what we found out is that the newborn unit had the highest number of requests, that is 39%. So requests per department, like I've said, pediatric are the highest at 39%, and the least was HDU, 1%. So we had medical wards at 22%, ICU at 13%, surgical ward 10%. Then we had another category, the forms were not indicated from where they actually came from, a whole 10%, which is worrying because we don't know, as we look at data analysis, whether there were other issues specific to certain departments that were actually not indicated, and we could not actually follow up. Then gynecology 4%, and 1%. So pre-authorization of restricted antibiotics as per the year. In 2020, we had 32.9% of the restricted antibiotics requested. 2021, we had 38.2%, and in 2022, we had 28.9%. Yes, so the proportion of antibiotics in the watch category that were requested, ceftazidime topped the list at 72.1%. Then we had piperacillin, tazobactam at 5.8%, ciprofloxacin 1.4%, clarithromycin 1%, and clindamycin at 0.2%. Then proportion of those in the reserve category that were actually requested. The highest was meropenem at 68%, then vancomycin 31%, and linezolid 1%. So the request with the antibiotic sensitivity test done, this was also, a point to think about, because 13.2% of the request had AST tests requested and done. 29% of the forms had no indication whether the test was requested for or not, and 57% had indicated they hadn't requested for that test. Then proportion of ASTs done per department, again, here I think what we can take home is the column for AST not conducted and not indicated. Both of them are quite high. And again, this informed what actions to take thereafter, because you can see for the ASTs that were conducted, for the medical wards 23%, pediatric 10%, gynecology 20%, renal had none, ICU 13%, HDU had none, and surgical 9%. But when you look at the proportions of the forms that actually were filled to request these drugs, but the tests were not done, we have, more than double of what was conducted. And for those that were not indicated, again, quite a high number. So for the isolates, we only isolated 12% from the samples that were collected. Not where there was no growth, or not, we never isolated anything. That was 8%. And for unknown status, meaning it was not recorded, again, quite high, 80%. So for proportion of antibiotics reviewed within 72 hours, those that were reviewed within 72 hours was around 8%. Those not, or rather reviewed way after 72 hours was 90%, and 2% was not indicated whether that antibiotic therapy was reviewed or not within the 3 days. Next. So these are more results. Also, when we went back to our stock control cards, we realized that through restrictions, we were able to minimize irrational use and also increase days of stock from 2019 to 2022. That is from 208 days of stock to 277 days of stock. Again, initially in 2019, we had an allocation of 3,768 USD, specifically for the antibiotics, or rather antimicrobials. But this has since increased to around 10,000 USD in 2019, that is annually. And more so is like an investment to try and encourage our prescribers to prescribe more of the antibiotics in the access category before they move to watch and reserve. Yeah, and you realize that some of these antibiotics in the access categories are also quite expensive. Currently, we are moving from ceftriaxone for surgical prophylaxis to cefazolin, which is like twice the price of ceftriaxone. And also this allocation, when we wanted to increase the range of the watch and reserve category antibiotics that we have, and these antibiotics are also quite expensive. So this is an investment whose outcome and impact to measure probably years to come. Next. So what some of the challenges that we faced, one was lack of an effective and appropriate IT infrastructure because all this work is done manually. Then task shifting because the AMS focal person not only deals with AMS activities, lack of up-to-date and comprehensive treatment guidelines, and erratic supply of commodities, which actually contributes to irrational use of the antibiotics mostly. Next, please. So at the end, we observed that this pre-authorization actually contributed to rational use of antibiotics and also led to an increase in availability of selected antibiotics. However, the review of antibiotics therapy within 72 hours had issues. It was quite low. So even for a patient who would require de-escalation or escalation, could not benefit from that. Then pre-authorization also exposed the minimal uptake of microbiology services as very few ASTs were carried out. So the AMS team actually put effort to address these challenges by reviewing, to encourage and sensitize clinicians to review the antimicrobials prescribed within 72 hours, increase uptake of microbiology services, and also promote proper documentation. Because we have seen most of the forms actually had, some of the key indicators were actually not indicated. So I think that is the end of my presentation. I would want to appreciate these institutions, Nyeri County Referral Hospital, the committees, MOH, and more specifically USAID MTAPS. They have really supported us in this journey, and we do appreciate. Thank you.